Hi everyone, welcome to today's session whereby we have been looking at Spring Cloud, and we have managed to tackle the first three features of Spring Cloud. And for today, I'm going to show you the service to service calls and load balancing before we proceed to do circuit breakers. So we are going to configure our department service to be able to call the employee service, be able to call the department service, and then we are going to start two instances of the department service, and we'll be able to see how the load balancing feature works. And ideally, whenever we are dealing with service to service calls, you need to understand the different REST clients that are available for Spring Boot. And to get started, I'm just going to walk you through the different REST clients that are available for you to use. And in this case, we have already made use of them whenever we were looking at the inter-service communication session. So I'm going just to explain what is happening there. And now that we are using the service discovery, we are going to see how then can we configure the service without necessarily making use of the port information in the service call and by obtaining the information from the service discovery. So let's just get started by opening our browser and search for Spring REST clients. So we are in just to search for Spring REST clients, and once you search this one, let me just zoom this one a little bit for you to be able to see clearly. So we are checking on the Spring REST client, and in this case you can see that it's actually within the Spring framework. So if you come here under Spring Cloud, you can see it's one of the projects of Spring Boot. And now if you click on the Spring framework here, you'll be able to see the different things which are available on the Spring framework. But then for now, to make it easy for you in terms of accessing this particular documentation, we are in just to search for Spring REST clients. And once we search for that, we are going to open the documentation coming from Spring REST clients. That is the Spring framework. Just click that, and you can see the different REST clients which are available. And for the first go that you're going to see here is going to be very simple. You can see that it's the Spring framework provides the following choices of making calls to REST endpoints. So the first one that we have is the REST client, which is the synchronous client, which has been introduced in Spring Boot 3.25 and above. So if you are making use of a version of Spring Boot lower than that, then you won't be able to make use of the Spring REST client. Now we have the WebClient, which is the non-blocking reactive client with the Fluent API, which is available by making use of the Spring Boot starter web flux dependency, and you'll be able to have the WebClient being given to you. So you can be able to create an instance of the WebClient and expose it, and you can make use of it to make a synchronous call, which is non-blocking. Then we have the RestTemplate, which is ideally mostly used in the previous versions of Spring Boot. So most of the new guys who are new to this particular section, then you might not have any experience of working with the REST template. But then within my session, I'm going to show you how also we make use of the REST template to make use of the synchronous client API. So as you can see, for the synchronous nature, we can make use of the REST template and the REST client. So the choice is going to depend on what is modern, and at the same time it's going to depend what is your code base having. So if you are working on a completely new microservice, I would advise that you go with the REST client. But then if you are making use of already existing code base, you can be able to upgrade to the REST client, which is provides the same structure of functionality, but then with improved APIs. Right, now we have the last one, which is the HTTP interface, annotated interface with generated dynamic proxy implementation. So for this, I'm going just to focus on the first three, and now in a future session whereby I'll be talking about REST clients alone, I'll be able to show you how we can make use of the HTTP interface. So let me just walk you through. So I'm going just to proceed and show the code whereby we need to make use of the the REST call from one service to another. And making use of the service discovery, we are going to make a few adjustments to our code base. So let's proceed to our workspace. Here you can see that I have my demo API gateway. I have my config repo, which holds the YAML files for all the services. Then I have my configuration server, which is able to read the configuration file from the demo config repo. Then I have my demo discovery server, which is used to register all the services in this particular case, so that we can be able to make use of the service names to make the calls. And then lastly, but not least, I have my department service, which is the initial service that we showcases the CRUD application for the department information. And then we have the employee service, which showcases the process of managing employees. And in this case, the employee service will be making a REST call to the department service to get information about the department linked to this particular employee. Right, the next thing that you'll be able to see that from the previous sessions, we have sections whereby we have done the deployment for the microservices, that is the department service and the employee deployment, which are here under Master.K8. You can check on the on my account on GitHub, and in this case you'll be able to see the different files. So let me just show you how you can be able to make access these particular references. So if you head over to GitHub, and then you search for my name here, Inga John, you should be able to see. Click on the repository section. You should be able to see the different repositories. So the first one is the Master.K8, which is holding the configuration files for the deployment. And then we have the demo configuration server, we have the discovery server, we have the department service, we have the employee service, and we have the config repo, and also the API gateway. So if you want to start from here, then you can just clone all these particular files, and you can be able to start from where we are as of today. Now, that said, we can now proceed and do a few adjustments within the employee service. So if you open the employee service and proceed to the service layer under the service section and the employee service implementation, you'll be able to see that I'm making use of whenever I'm fetching the information of an employee, get by employee with the department, I'm actually making a call to the department service to be able to get the list. So as you can see, I make the list, I extract the information of the employee, which is available on the employee database, and then from there I make a call to get the badge by making a badge request to the department service, which will be able now to give me the information for each particular employee. And from there I map those particular department lists that I get, and then I map the department response, and I create a map of that, and then whereby we have the department ID and the department response information. Then from there we set for each particular employee, we are setting the department information by getting the department from the map of the list that we get back. As you can see now here, we are making use of RestClient, which is, let me just try to zoom this one a little bit, zoom in, so that you can be able to see clearly. So you can see that I'm making use of RestClient, and this particular RestClient is the one that we have talked about. Now you can see up here, I've just injected my RestClient, all right? So I'm showing you all the three. So with this case, you can see that the RestClient is this one, and it's being used to make that call to this particular URL. As you can see, the department host URL. And this particular department host URL, you check on the resources section, you'll be able to see that it's actually referring to the department service variable. Otherwise, if that is not set, then you can see that I've just made use of the port, the host and port information. So if the department service changes the port, then it will mean that my service won't be working anymore. So what we are going to do, we are going to make use of the discovery server to update this particular value so that we can be able to make the call without necessarily requiring to know the port information of the department service. So the first thing that we're going to do is to introduce the employee service to be able to register itself to the discovery server, and then at the same time externalize all this configuration for the employee service to the config repo, and from there we can be able now to proceed. Now let's get started by creating an employee service file, externalizing the configuration. So take the name and go to the demo config repo, create a new file with the same name, which is going to be employee service.yml. Make use of YML instead of YAML. This one, make use of YML because that is Spring config server friendly, and it serves the same purpose, so there is no difference, but then make use of YML extension. Right, with that, what you're going to do is transfer everything that belongs to the employee service. So I'm going just to transfer everything, copy everything, and go to the employee service YAML and paste it there. Now from here, we are going to remove a few things. So the first thing that you're going to remove is the application name. So you're going to remove it from the config repo. And then from there, we are going to leave everything else for this one left there, right? Then the next thing that we're going to do is we have to ensure that this particular department service is going to run on a particular port. So what we're going to do is just introduce server dot port. So I'm going to just introduce the server port information for our department. So you can just see that you can make use of that port information. And in this case, we are going to run our department service on port 8080. All right, now that's it. Let me see why this one is refusing to go. Okay, sorry, we need to have some space here so that it can be able to recognize it as a YAML file. So you can see that I've set this particular server port on the config repo. So if I need to change the port information about my service, I can come on the config repo and change and restart my service, and automatically to be able to pick that particular information. Now, with that said, the next thing that we're going to do is now clean up this particular application YAML file within the employee service by removing any configuration that has been duplicated on the config server, and we are going to just remain with the employee service. Now the next thing that we are going to do is we have to ensure that this particular employee service knows where they fetch the configuration from, and by making use of our config client. So what I'm going to do is go to the POM file of the employee service, and then from here I'm going just to add status. So control click this one, and from here I'm going just to search for config client. So I'm going just to add that, and then the other additional dependency that we are going to add is the one for registration of to the Eureka service discovery. So in this case, I'm going to just search for discovery client. So I'm going just to search for Eureka discovery client, and in that case, I'm going to press enter, and I'm going to click proceed. Right, so once all that is done, you can see that now my two additional dependencies have been added here, whereby it's Netflix Eureka client, and in this case we have the starter config information. Now once this is set, the next thing we are going to configure the URL of the config server within the employee application YAML file. All right. Now with this, we are going to do spring.cloud. So we're going to have that here. So spring.cloud. So I'm going just to say config. It's going to be spring.config.import, and then in this case we are going to import this particular value from we can pick the value from the department service. In this case we had just created one, so we can just transfer that. So you can see that we just need config, import, and then the optional value. So I'm going just to make use of this so that we can be able to duplicate all that for within our microservice. Now you might be wondering, what is this? I'm making use of this one as an environment variable. Whenever I be deploying it on Docker, I can make use of this variable to set the value of the Eureka server address, and in this case by default colon, the default is going to take 888, whereby this is the value of our config server that is running. Right, now with that said, we are going to save that, and now the next thing that we are going to do within the file of the employee service YAML file within the config repo, we are just to also set it and tell it to ensure that it's able to register with the Eureka. So I'm going just to copy that and put it on the department service. All right. So with that, you can see that now all our configurations are okay and externalized. Now the next thing that we're going to do, let's first confirm that all our services are actually running okay. So the first thing that we're going to do is start the configuration server. So I'm going just to open my terminal here. All right, so I'm going just to open my terminal here on the demo configuration server. I'm going to do maven clean spring boot run. I'm going to run that first application. I'm going to open the second one. It's going to be the discovery server. So I'm going just to cd to demo discovery server. So I'm going just to head over there and do maven clean spring boot run. So you have to start these two sequentially as I've done. So the config server should be started first, followed by the discovery server, because the discovery server also fetches the configuration from the config repo or the config server. So you can see we have the discovery server here. Right. Now the next thing that we're going to do is very simple. We are going to start now our department service. And in this case, I'm going just to open the department service in the integrated terminal. I'm going just to start that mvn clean. So I'm going just to make use of the same command. Then from there, you can just proceed. This one, you can be able to execute them in any order. So I'm going just to start them mvn clean. And I'm going to make use of mvn clean spring boot run. And in this case, we are going to have our department repository, the API gateway also started. Now lastly, I'm going to start my employee service. All right, so one thing, I need to start my Docker, so I've forgotten that. So I'm going just to start my Docker desktop. So let me just start that to ensure that I have my MySQL running. As you can see that now the department service has failed because it's unable to connect to JDBC to obtain the JDBC configuration for Jakarta. So let me just start my Docker application that is for MySQL. So my Docker service is running now. I can restart the department service and then also start now the employee service also. So open integrated terminal, and in this case we are going to have my employee service also started. Right, now once all that is done, what you're going to do is head over to the browser and do localhost, and here we are going to do localhost. My keyboard is refusing. Let me see. Localhost, hold on. Right, so we are going to head over to the browser and do localhost 8761. And this is, you can see now here we have our demo API gateway started. It's running on port 7000. And then we have the department service running on port 8081 and employee service running on port 8080. So if I click this one, you can be able to see that I'm just going to get an empty information. It's actuator information. In this case, you can see that it's taking the host name for my desktop. All right, so with this one, if we are going to open our employee service and now make the calls to the employee service. So I'm going to open the REST HTTP here, and what I'm going to do is now, instead of making use of this HTTP, I'm going to make use of localhost 127.0.1, and then I'm going to make use of the API gateway to make that call. Right, so you can see that I'm going to make use of 7000 to make that call. Right, so you can see now if I make this call, it will not be able to determine. If you check here, you can see that there is no path for API employee. What is happening here is that we haven't registered the the route for the employee service within the API gateway. So if you check on the API gateway, which is the second last here, you can see that if I just send once again, let me make the call, you can see that there's no value that is being generated. So that is ideally due to the fact that we don't have that route registered, right? So it will be able to return us a 44 not found. Now let's see what is going to happen. How are we going then to ensure that the API gateway is aware of the employee service? So what we're going to do is we go to the demo config repo, and in this case we are going to go to the demo API gateway. Yesterday we were able to expose the department service. Now what you're going to do again is going to be very simple. Duplicate that route and make it available for the employee service. So in this case I'm going just to change this one into employee service, and then the load balancer here we are going to pick the name from the config server. As you can see, the employee service is registered with this particular name, so I'm going just to pick that. And you can see that automatically we denote the LB to ensure that we are making use of the load balancing value. And in this case, we are going to proceed. The API endpoint that we are going to expose is API employee. So you're going to have that, and anything else after that. So with this, remember we have made the update on the demo config repo, and automatically that will mean that we need to restart our API gateway and restart our config server. So what I'm going to do is just start the config server first, restart the config server so that we can be able to pick the new file. So I'm going just to restart it. Alright, so as you can see, not necessarily the other services can still run if because already they have already obtained the information from the config server. Unless now you are making another call, they try to fetch the information for the new instances, and they fail in case the config server is down. Right. So with this, we need to also now restart our API gateway. So I'm going just to restart the API gateway also. After that change, so it can be able to fetch the new information from the config server. Alright, so what I'm going to do is just restart this again. Alright, so with that, you'll be able to see now, we should be able now to make the call to the employee service and be able to get information once the department service is up and running. As you can see now, the demo API gateway is still down. You can see that this is one instance is down. So once it's up and registered, and you'll be able to see now the status now becomes up. Alright, so that's how we track the instances, and also how Eureka is able to track the instances of our microservices. Now let's proceed to make the call once again using the port 7000, which is the API gateway port. And I'm going just to create another user, which is going to be Wilfred William. Let me just get to the same information, and I'm going to put this one to be in department number 1. So I'm going just to send the request. You can see at the moment we don't have that still. We need now to confirm whether this one is okay. Let's see a little bit quickly. We are going to confirm if the routes of employee are okay. So we should be able to have API employee. You need to confirm. We give it a minute or two. Okay, now let's see what is happening here. Employee service and application YAML for the gateway. We needed to, okay, it seems that I didn't save this one, so I'm going just again to redo it. I don't know, where did I put that? Okay, let me close some of the files here that we are not dealing with. You can see that it seems that I didn't save this particular file, so what I'm going to do again is now duplicate again. Copy that and then duplicate down here and have this one as the employee service. employee service, and then this will be employee service, and then I'm going to also change this one employee. Right, so let me quickly restart the services in the background, and so that the length of the video will not be long. So let me alright, now all our services are up and running. As you can see, our gateway is running. Now let's confirm that within Eureka all the services are up. As you can see, they are actually up. Now what we're going to do here is very simple. You need to refresh that. All the services are up. Now we can now try to make the call to the API gateway for creating the employee. In this case, we are going to send that request, and still it's complaining that it doesn't have that. So what is happening here is that it seems that it's deleting the value of this particular instance. So what I'm going to do, let me confirm what the issue could be whenever we having a new route. Alright, now all our services are up and running. Now we can just confirm that the issue that I've been facing is ideally whenever you put this particular config repo, automatically, because I have a link to GitHub, it whenever I restart my config server, it automatically clone a new repo from the GitHub section. So what you're going to do, you just commit your files whenever you make changes before you restart the config server. Just commit and push that to your repo, so that in case of anything, in case of the cloning of the new configuration, they be up to date. Now that is the issue that I faced earlier, but then I've managed to fix that. Now what you're going to do, you can see that now all my employee services are up and running, and now we can confirm that within Eureka we have that 3 instances up and running. Now let's proceed and make the call to the employee gateway, or the microservice gateway, which is going to save that particular data. Still, it seems that we can't be able to make that call. So what we're going to do is confirm that our API gateway is up to date. So I'm going just again to do that, so that you can see that that is the issue that I've been facing. So what I'm going to do is just duplicate this route once again. So you can just duplicate that route once again, and in this case it's going to be employee service, and in this case we are going to switch this one to be employee, and in this case you need to have employee. Alright, so with this change I need just to commit my repository, and in this case I want just to say git commit add. In this case it's going to be add employee service route. Alright, now from here I'm going just to push this, so that before that then I can now proceed to restart my config server and my employee service. So I'm going just to restart the 2 services. Again, configuration server, then followed by the employee service. In this case I'm going to stop it, and then again do the clean and set that. So we need to ensure that this route is actually available within our repository, and the repository should be clean before we start the service. So in this case you can see that everything now else, the configuration server has been started on port 888. Then now my department service actually is starting. Alright. Alright, the other thing we need to restart is our API gateway. So we need to restart our API gateway so that it can be able to pick to fetch the configurations. But then I'm going to show you how you can ensure that all the services are able to fetch the new configurations whenever you make changes. So you can see that this one now, the route is there. Let's just restart our API gateway so that it can be able now to fetch the configuration from the config server. Ideally, almost every service needs to be restarted in this case. So in this case, we might just to restart the configuration discovery server also to fetch the new configurations for that. So starting everything. Alright, now after restarting all the services, we are in just now to make the call. Now I'm going just to make the call to create the new employee, I'm going to make that call. As you can see now, employee with the number 3 has been created. Now from here I can proceed to list all the employees. In this case, you can see that now everything is okay. Now let's see the last link whereby we are fetching employee with the department information. So if I make this call as is, you can see that I'm able to get the information. But then what I'm going to do is now let me see if I change the port information of the department service, what would happen in this case. So I'm going to again restart all the services in the second session to show you that now here we have that particular issue we are going to face in the next session. Thank you for watching the video. Remember to subscribe and like the video, and also comment in case you face any challenge that you can be able to unlock you. Thank you.